I never expected a sweeping act of kindness to change our lives forever. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The phone call that shattered my world. Your father, he had an accident. A voice on the other end, shaky and filled with dread. My heart dropped. Tears blurred my vision. I could barely breathe. Each second stretched into eternity. My mind raced with fears that clawed at my chest. Was he okay? Would I ever hear his laugh again? Anna, just 22, but life had already piled burdens on my shoulders. My dad was my rock. Always there, guiding me through life's storms. I grew up in a small town where dreams sometimes felt out of reach. My mom passed when I was little, and my dad raised me alone. He worked 2 jobs, yet he always found time to take me stargazing, telling me stories about the cosmos, his eyes sparkling like the stars above, but now, everything was a haze of panic and uncertainty. The hospital lights were harsh, illuminating faces that drifted in and out of focus. Nurses bustled around, whispering amongst themselves. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air. I squeezed my hands together, feeling the tremor in my fingertips. I watched as they wheeled him into surgery. Silence engulfed me, punctuated only by the distant beeping of machines, like a metronome counting down my hopes. Hours passed. Each tick of the clock echoed painfully in my ears. Would he make it? I could feel the eyes of waiting families on me, a mix of concern and pity. I wanted to scream. To run. My heart raced as I tried to steady my breaths. How could I face life without him? Then, a commotion. A mysterious figure entered the waiting room. Tall, draped in a long coat that seemed to float as they walked. Dark sunglasses hid their eyes, despite the dim lighting. I felt a jolt of energy ripple through the air, curiosity tingling at the back of my neck. They moved closer, the whispers of others growing louder. Who were they? I could see the aura of uncertainty surrounding them. Can I help you? A voice from the crowd broke the tension. But the figure just shook their head, a faint smile appearing as they glanced over the room. It felt like they were searching for someone, or something. I couldn't look away. My heart raced. In that moment, somehow, I knew they held secrets that could change everything. A thud. I turned. The door to the operating room swung open. A doctor stepped out, his face pale, grim. Panic bubbled inside me like a boiling pot. Anna. That one word sent chills down my spine. My knees weakened. What was he going to say? I could feel the eyes on me, anticipation mingling with dread. Why was everything spiraling? The mysterious figure stepped toward me, their presence commanding the room, a wave of stillness washing over the chaos. My heart pounded as the doctor motioned for me to follow him. But that figure, they were looking at me, their eyes burning with intensity behind the glasses. I wanted to understand, to know what role they played in this strange unfolding drama. But instead, I was frozen. In that critical moment, my entire world teetered on the brink. What had they come to tell me? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The doctor's face blurred as he approached, his words blending into an incomprehensible hum. In that fragmented moment, a tsunami of emotions crashed over me: fear, despair, and a glimmer of hope, all tangled together, threatening to drown me. My heart hammered in my chest, drowning out the distant murmurs of the waiting room. I felt as though I were standing on the precipice of an abyss, teetering, unsure if I would plunge into darkness or find my footing again. Anna, your father, he's stable for now, but the doctor's voice cracked, the weight of his next sentence hanging ominously in the air. Instinctively, I clutched the small pendant around my neck, me mother's last gift to me, seeking its comfort. There are serious complications, and we need to discuss them. Complications. The word clawed at my throat, leaving me gasping for air. My mind drifted back to the precious moments I had with my dad, the way he'd lift me onto his shoulders so I could touch the stars, his laughter echoing in our backyard, the way he'd always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. As chill crept deep into my bones, I fought to focus on the doctor's words. He spoke of surgeries, risks, and timelines. The world around me dimmed as I pieced together the enormity of what was being said. Each term felt like a blow, dragging me deeper into despair. I searched the doctor's eyes for a flicker of reassurance, but all I found was a painful sincerity. Suddenly, I was aware of the figure once more, hovering just outside the doctor's shadow. I had been so absorbed in my own turmoil that I'd forgotten they were there. They took a slow step forward, as if sensing my distress, and the room felt more suffocating. "Anna," they said softly, their voice carrying a depth of emotion that cut through my haze of panic. "I know this is hard. But I want you to know, you're not alone." A wave of disbelief washed over me. How could they say that? They were a stranger in a place filled with familiar pain. But there was something in their Tania sincerity that resonated with a truth I desperately needed to hear. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure hesitated, and their sunglasses slipped down slightly, revealing a flash of vulnerability in their eyes. "I'm someone who's been through something similar. I understand what you're feeling." In an instant, I felt a connection amidst the chaos, a fragile thread binding us in this shared suffering. A part of me longed to reach out, to confide in them, to find solace. But the burden of my father's condition pressed heavily on my heart, overshadowing everything that I asked. "Is there anything I can do to help?" They offered, an unexpected kindness glowing within their earnest gaze. I shook my head, too afraid to hope. Could they possibly bridge the chasm of my despair? The doctor cleared his throat, drawing me back into the harsh reality. "I need you to focus, Anna. Your father's recovery depends a lot on support, yours and the family's. If he wakes up and feels he isn't alone, it could change everything for him." The weight of those words settled like lead in my stomach. I envisioned my dad lying unconscious, alone, fighting against an unseen foe in some hidden realm. I envisioned myself lost, the swirling chaos threatening to suffocate me. And yet, the figure's presence stirred something within me, a small ember of strength. "You're strong, Anna," they urged softly. "You have to be for him." That I wanted to respond, but I could only nod, a silent agreement forged amid fear. I felt the flicker of hope ignite within my chest, just as the reality of the moment shoved darkness to the edges of my consciousness. Suddenly, the room's fluorescent lights flickered, and an ominous tension seeped in, the kind that precedes a storm. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, followed by panicked voices. Everyone turned to look, confusion and alarm rippling through the waiting area. My heart raced. Before I could ask what was happening, the figure locked eyes with me, urgency lining their features. "Stay right here," they commanded before gliding toward the chaos, their coat billowing behind them. "Wait!" I shouted, but they were already gone, weaving through the crowd, disappearing into the turmoil. I felt an unsettling mix of abandonment and dread. Should I follow? The doctor's voice broke through the clamor. "Stay put, Anna. It could be a safety issue." But I was already on the move, pulled forward by a wild instinct as my heart drove me toward the unknown. I needed answers, and it seemed the mysterious figure was the only one who could help me make sense of this fractured reality. As I pushed through the crowd, I felt the adrenaline spike my senses, and just as I reached the door, the clamor extended into an anguished shout. "No!" a nurse cried. Time stood still. My breath caught in my throat as I pressed forward, fear thrumming against my ribs, and just like that, the world shifted beneath me. I had to know the truth, no matter what the cost. As I pushed through the throngs of anxious bodies, each one a pillar of tension, my heart pounded louder than the chaotic din. Fear gnawed at my insides, curling around my instincts like a vice. I could hardly breathe. Every step felt like a betrayal of the stillness I'd fought to keep from my father, yet a deeper part of me screamed for resolution. "Anna!" A voice called out, a familiar tone that gave me pause. I turned, my breath hitching as my eyes landed on Rachel, my childhood friend, her face streaked with panic. "What are you doing here? You need to stay with your dad. I can't just sit and wait." "Something is wrong, Rachel. Something is really wrong," I replied, desperation lining my voice as I scanned the hall for the figure. "Did you see anyone?" "They were just here," Rachel's brow furrowed. "Who?" "Anna, you shouldn't be." A loud crash from the emergency exit startled me, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. "That's where they could be." Felt it instinctively, pulling me forward. "I need to go," I insisted, urgency lacing through my words as I pushed past her. "Stop," she pleaded, grabbing my arm. Her eyes bore into mine, their worry an anchor in my tumultuous sea of thoughts. "You can't face this alone. Just wait a moment." But Rachel didn't understand. I felt like I was teetering over the edge, and if I didn't act, I might lose more than the fragile hope I held for my father. My heart broke at the thought of dragging her into the chaos, but the connection I had felt with the stranger lingered, urging me not to shy away. "Please," I shouted, tearing myself free and continuing forward, the crash of the door sending a clear signal that change was imminent. As I neared the exit, the bustling chaos outside the hospital settled into a hushed tension. My pulse quickened, and my throat felt dry. I burst through the door, eyes scanning the dimly lit alley for any sign of the figure. Shadows clung to the corners like whispers filled with secrets, but no one was there. From the uncertainty, a soft sob broke the silencia, sound that made my blood run cold. I followed it instinctively, pushing deeper into the fray. Rounding the corner, I spotted them, the figure crouched low, their back turned to me, cradling something in their arms. "Aren't you supposed to be helping?" I said, half accusingly, half desperate for an explanation. I stepped closer, breath hitching as I realized it wasn't just a stranger crouched in turmoil, but a girl no older than 12, her face streaked with tears. "Please, she needs help," the figure murmured, their voice thick with emotion as they pressed a small hand to the girl's forehead. "Stay with me, just a little longer." At that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about my father, but about so many others caught in the web of suffering. The girl's pale skin and trembling breaths echoed the fears I harbored for my father. Overwhelmed, I approached tentatively. "What happened?" I managed, my heart racing as reality crashed over me like a winter wave. "She collapsed in the waiting area," the figure said slowly, their brows knit with worry. "She's alone. Call for help," I urged, my mind racing through what I could do. "We can't just stand here." But they shook their head, their eyes glistening with empathy that mirrored my own turmoil. "We need to keep her calm. I can feel her heart racing. If we can." Just before I could process the scene unfolding before me, the crash door swung open wildly, and a doctor sprinted from the hospital, leading a small group of nurses. As they approached, the fear in their faces mirrored the panic within me, every nurse's expression filled with an urgency I recognized. "Get her onto the stretcher," the doctor commanded as they caught sight of the girl, reality's weight pressing heavily against us all. I stepped aside, allowing them space while the urgency of the moment ignited a fight within me. I turned to the figure, who still knelt at the girl's side. "You'll be okay," I heard myself whispering, the words feeling fragile as they slipped from my lips. "Well, get you help." The little girl's eyes met mine, filled with fear, and I felt the distance of uncertainty stretching between us. Just then, a calm, deep breath escaped from the figure beside her. "We're all in this together. We will be okay. I promise." Something in their presence ignited hope, a fragile flicker amidst the ever-changing tide of our lives. But just then, an agonizing scream echoed from deep within the hospital's bowels, a sound of unspeakable despair that gripped my heart in a vice. The figure stiffened beside me, and for a moment, the world fell silent as we looked at each other, understanding the weight of what that cry might mean. "Anna," they said softly as the nurses rolled the little girl away, leaving us exposed to an unknown fate ahead. The darkness in their gaze mirrored the rising tide of helplessness swirling within me. And in that instant, I felt the fragile bond between hope and despair flex, ready to snap. What deeper storm lay in wait for us just beyond those walls, the walls that could hold both life and loss, and how would it change everything that had once seemed so simple? The figure took a hesitant step back towards the entrance, their silhouette stark against the light spilling from the doorway. "I have to find out what happened. We can't ignore this." My heart raced, the reality of the news we had just received crashing back into my world with new ferocity. What if, but before I could finish, they had bolted inside, following the sound of that anguished cry? I was left standing in the chaotic swirl of emotions, questions blowing through my mind like leaves caught in a storm. What if hope and despair were two sides of the very same coin? And as quickly as hope flickered, how fast could it extinguish? As I stood frozen in the alley, the echo of that anguished scream reverberated through me, wielding its power over my thoughts. The glow from the hospital's entrance felt distant and cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the connection I'd just experienced. I clenched my fists, torn between the impulse to follow and the weight of dread settling like a stone in my stomach. The flicker of hope that had ignited within me suddenly felt fragile, an ember susceptible to the thundering uncertainty around me. My heart raced as I fought against the fear gripping my throat. I thought of my father, lying in a hospital bed, and a wave of guilt washed over me. How was I supposed to help him if I couldn't even bear the chaos unfolding before me? I closed my eyes for a brief moment, willing myself to find clarity in the midst of turmoil. Some small part of me clung to the notion that if I just held on a little longer, answers would come to light. Summoning my courage, I took a deep breath and stepped towards the hospital entrance, my legs trembling with each stride. The bustling energy of medical professionals swiftly pushed me aside, their voices rising in urgency as they raced toward the source of the scream. I followed behind, heart in my throat, feeling the electric energy of the moment. As I reached the entrance, a nurse collided with me, her expression stark with determination. "You can't go in there," she snapped, eyes wide with urgency. "It's not safe, I need to know what's happening," I shouted, wishing desperately for some kind of clarity. "Please. Something's wrong, and I have to help." The nurse hesitated, her facial muscles tightening. And in that fleeting moment of hesitation, she softened. "I understand you're scared, but there's a lot of chaos right now. You need to wait outside." "Wait?" My insides churned. No one can afford to wait anymore. But even as I protested, a powerful figure emerged from the growing crowd, crashing through the pale curtains of uncertainty. It was Rachel, her eyes aflame with purpose as she pushed forward, ignoring the warnings. "Get her out of here," she cried, finding me amidst the chaos. "Come on, and I'll have to go." "No. I can't just leave," I pressed, an emotional war raging within me. What made my needs more important than the anguished cries from within the hospital? I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, urging me forward. "Just trust me," Rachel shouted, her voice beckoning me with a fierce kindness. "You can't do this alone. I won't let you face this alone." The warmth of her words washed over me, and I felt the crushing tension loosen slightly. As Rachel grabbed my hand, a memory flickered to life. Endless afternoons spent weaving dreams of the future, unbroken by the heaviness that plagued our current reality. "We always promised to stand together, remember?" she said with urgency. "Together." The word echoed in my mind, kindling both comfort and fear. Together, we stepped back while the atmosphere within the hospital crackled with anxiety. We watched as paramedics set up a triage station outside the emergency entrance, fingers flying over walkie-talkies, relaying details of medical emergencies that felt far too personal. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the crowd of medical professionals, a man with chestnut hair clinging to his forehead. His eyes darted, searching for someone. There was a raw desperation in the way he pushed through. I felt drawn to him, as if something invisible connected us amidst the chaos. "What happened?" he cried out, his gaze fixed solely on the nurses bustling around, faces clouded with urgency. "Where is she? Please. Where's my sister?" A chill swept through me as I caught the frantic disbelief in his voice. I glanced at Rachel, who could see the turmoil mirrored in my eyes. "Anna, we can't stay here. It's not safe," she urged quietly, squeezing my hand firmly. But my heart rushed with the realization that I wasn't alone, neither was that man. Just then, a fluffy dog appeared, skirting between the nurses and jumping into the man's arms. It wore a makeshift bandana, featuring hastily drawn hearts, and immediately began to lick his face, easing the heaviness of despair. He let out a breathless laugh, as if in that brief moment of joy, the weight of the world had lifted slightly from his shoulders. "Charlie!" he cried, and the same warmth radiating from the dog seemed to blanket the crowd, even as new fears engulfed me. "See?" Rachel whispered, glancing back to the comforting scene unfolding. "Sometimes kindness finds a way through the darkness. We just have to hold on." But the noise and chaos inside the hospital pierced through the sweetness of the moment, reminding me of what was looming. My mind raced back to my father, each thought tinged with urgency. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air. "Joseph!" a nurse shouted, and immediately my heart dropped. In an instant, the man's expression twisted with dread as he shifted toward the sound, leaving me momentarily frozen. The full weight of the world seemed to shift again. I should have felt relief, knowing more people were fighting for those in need, but the unspoken connection I felt with him only heightened my sense of dread. Together with Rachel, I turned back to the doors, where the tide of uncertainty was rising stronger than ever. Would I ever regain control? What would happen to the quiet moments of kindness amidst the horror? Just as Rachel and I prepared to step back into the noise of panic, another scream erupted, this one sharp and piercing, freezing us both in place. I felt the air grow thick, the walls seemingly closing in on me. My pulse raced anew, the reality of choices weighing heavily upon my conscience. "Anna," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling as she clutched my arm tighter. "We have to find a way to help now." But before I could answer, the doors swung shut with a resounding thud, drowning our voices in a haze of fear and resolve, leaving me wondering if kindness could truly shift the tide of fate. Just as I was about to re-enter the fray inside the hospital, the heavy doors swung open once more, and a familiar face emerged. Dr. Martinez, the compassionate physician who had treated my father on more than one occasion, stepped outside, her brow furrowed with worry. She paused, her gaze locking onto mine as she caught her breath. "Anna," she shouted, the urgency in her voice slicing through the cacophony surrounding us. "I need you to listen carefully." The world around me seemed to stall, the sounds of sirens, shouts, and frantic footsteps dulled into an indistinct hum. My heart thudded loudly in my ears as I focused on Dr. Martinez, clinging to the hope that she held answers. "Your father is stable, but we need your family to be here," she continued, her expression earnest and sincere. "There's something we need to talk about, and I would rather do it inside." "Stable?" I echoed, feeling the burden of my emotions shift for the first time. There was hope, however fragile, glowing in my chest, kindling just enough strength to push back the darkness that pressed around me. What do you mean?" Dr. Martinez hesitated, the weight of an unspoken truth evident. I could sense the turmoil behind her reassuring facade. "We're facing some critical issues, and I need you to help us address them. Your voice will matter when we discuss your father's care." Before I could respond, Rachel's grip on my arm tightened, as if she sensed me slipping away. "You can't go in there alone, Anna. Let me come with you." "No," Dr. Martinez interjected, her tone soft yet firm. "I can only discuss specifics with family members for you. It must be this way." She glanced back toward the hospital entrance. "We'll figure this out together. Please, Anna." My mind raced as I weighed her words. There was an aching desperation in my chest that I could no longer ignore. I thought of my father, the gentleness of his smile, the way he led our family not just through laughter but through storms we thought we could never weather. A tight knot formed in my throat. My voice trembled as I found myself nodding. "Okay. I'll go," I said, surprised by the strength I found in my own resolve. I turned to Rachel, who met my gaze with concern and understanding. "Just breathe," she reassured me, her eyes glimmering with the kind of loyalty that made my heart swell. "I'll be right here when you come out. You're not alone." That I steeled myself and crossed the threshold. As the noise spiraled back into focus, I felt weaker, as if the world outside, with the barking dog and the chaotic crowd, had been my shield. Dr. Martinez led me deeper into the heart of the hospital, where people hustled about, their eyes full of purpose and worry. I followed, barely registering the sterile smells and the echoing beeps of machines, determined to discover my father's fate. That I in the room where my father lay, the brightness of the fluorescent lights felt uncomfortably harsh. He looked so small, lost in the vastness of the hospital bed, the beeping machines flashing warnings I could not comprehend. A flicker of emergency lights cast shadows across my father's pallid face, and the sight of him wrought a fresh wave of fear within me. "Anna," Dr. Martinez said gently, drawing me away from my turmoil. "We're running into complications with your father's recovery, but we need to talk about the next steps, and we desperately need your input." "Complications?" I breathed, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. "What do you mean?" Her gaze was steady, but her expression was grave. "It's an advanced stage of a condition we didn't fully uncover earlier. If we can have your family here to discuss treatment options, we might have a chance." A hollow ache echoed within me, deeper than I understood. I glanced back at my father, feeling his fight within every fiber of my being, caught between hope and despair. "I can't. No, I won't lose him. There has to be something we can do." But before I could utter another thought, the shouts grew closer, voices rising, and a hushed commotion erupted just outside. My heart seized. I struggled to focus on Dr. Martinez's words as panic clawed at me. There was an urgency in her demeanor, a sense of foreboding I couldn't evade. Suddenly, the door flung open. A panicked nurse rushed in, eyes huge with alarm. "Doctor, we need you immediately. There's been an incident in the ER." I could barely process her words, my chest tightening with the fear of what was happening outside. Dr. Martinez's expression shifted, and she gathered herself with a fierceness I had not seen before, her hands moving deftly to calm the raging storm before us. "Stay here, Anna," she commanded, and before I could answer, she was already gone. That I was left alone, my father's steady breathing juxtaposed against the chaos erupting beyond the sterile walls, and my heart raced with dread. Would they return in time? I closed my eyes, willing myself to be stronger. Then my father stirred, his fingers twitching ever so slightly beneath the blanket as if he could sense my presence. With a shaky breath, I took his hand and held it tight, feeling the warmth of his skin against the coldness of reality washing over me. "Just hold on, Dad," I whispered, fighting against the tears pooling in my eyes. "You have to hold on," and as I nested my head against the bed, the pain of uncertainty gripped my heart tighter than ever. What other challenges lay beyond this moment? What decisions would tear at the fabric of our lives? Simultaneously, another scream echoed through the emergency wing, pulling me from my fragile moment of peace. The world was shattering once more, and I wasn't prepared for what would come next. The piercing scream echoed through the sterile walls, a heart-wrenching sound that reverberated with desperation. My grip on my father's hand tightened instinctively, his pulse beneath my fingertips a fragile reminder that life still clung to him amidst impending chaos. I found myself lost in thoughts only a daughter could have. How to navigate this nightmare, how to gather the strength to keep moving forward when every heartbeat felt like a ticking bomb. Unsure of my surroundings, I focused on my father. His brow was furrowed, not from pain but from the unseen battles he was waging within. I whispered to him, "You're going to get through this, Dad. I believe in you." My own voice was a comforting lie, stitched together by fear and love, but his steady breaths fractured the weight of my worries. Moments dragged like hours, my heart racing under the pressure of uncertainty. Just when I thought the room would swallow me whole, a soft knock came from the door. I looked up, hoping for my father's physician, but the sight that met my eyes made my heart stumble. A young nursing assistant stood in the doorway, her features soft as she entered, almost like a light breaking through clouds. In her hands, she held a steaming cup of liquid, the familiar tantalizing aroma of chamomile wafting through the air. "I thought you might need this," she said, her voice gentle and inviting as she approached. "Thank you," I whispered, momentarily taken aback by her kindness, a stark contrast to the storm surrounding us. I reached for the cup and cradled it, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, a grounding sensation in a world that felt completely unmoored. I took a sip, and the herbal flavor infused with hints of honey calmed the chaos within just slightly. "Are you all right?" she asked, her gaze flickering between me and my father. There was a sincerity shimmering in her eyes as if, even for a fleeting moment, she could tether me back to a sense of normality. I am just scared," I admitted, the words spilling out unguarded. "He's been fighting for so long," and now my voice quaked as I looked at my dad, and with that, the dam of emotions broke. "I don't know how to face whatever is coming next." Her expression softened further, reflecting a deep well of compassion. "It's okay to feel that way. We don't often talk about how hard it is for family members. Your fears are valid, but he knows you're here. That's what matters." Tears brimmed again as I wished I could mirror her confidence. "Thank you for being here," I managed through my sobs. "It matters more than you know." In that brief exchange, as fleeting as it was, the weight of impending sorrow felt just a little lighter, and I clung to that like a lifeline. The noise beyond the walls seemed to fade again, replaced by the rhythm of my father's breath and the sense of solace in that small act of kindness. The nurse offered a warm smile before slipping quietly out, leaving me with thoughts of compassion blazing like dim stars against my despair, but my moment of reprieve shattered as new voices erupted outside the door. I strained to listen, catching fragments of conversation, a mixture of commands and panicked whispers. An orderly rushed by, his stony face revealing a grim story of urgency. "Code blue in the emergency room. We need all hands," he shouted, the gravity of his words seeping through the air like a chill. Grappling with rising dread, I turned back to my father, still in his battle-induced silence. Suddenly, everything felt impossibly real, almost suffocating. I couldn't shake the idea that whatever crisis loomed outside, it could sweep through here, too, sweeping us up with it. My phone buzzed violently on the small table next to me, jarring me further from my thoughts. I glanced down and saw Rachel's name flashing on the screen. I momentarily hesitated, anxiety creeping back. Do I even have the words to reassure her? In the end, I decided to answer. I held my breath, anticipation building in the pit of my stomach. "Hey, Anna. How's it going? Any news?" Rachel's voice cracked from the other end of the line, bright but tremulous, carrying the weight of her own fears. "Dad is stable," but my voice faltered again, and I let it fade into silence, knowing she could sense my hesitation. Silence stretched heavily, thickened by unwelcome truths left unspoken. "Anna, we're all here for you," Rachel affirmed softly, determination flowing through her tone. "We can come in. Mom and we don't want you facing any of this alone." It felt comforting yet burdening to hear her unwavering support. I yearned for her presence, yet the thought of dragging them into this storm tore at me. "All I can do is wait," I responded finally, my throat thick with emotion. It might be in that moment, an alarming shriek erupted from the emergency section, followed by an unusual commotion, drowning my words. My heart stopped, realizing whatever untold crisis was unfolding. It felt premonitory, inching ever closer to our fragile solace. "Anna." Rachel called again, panic threading through her voice as I stood frozen in place, the lines between hope and despair fracturing anew. Before I could respond, the door swung wide with Forcean air of chaos rushing in, blurring the thin line I so desperately tried to maintain. And then, amidst all the upheaval, I caught a glimpse of a flutter of familiar Redmi Brothers jacket, the last person I expected to see standing against the tide of fear that threatened to drag us all under. He looked wild, his eyes wide with concern. "Anna, we need to talk. You won't believe what's happening." And just like that, my heart plunged again, into an even deeper uncertainty than before, haunted by the promise that right beyond our door, everything was about to change forever. The fluorescent lights cast an unforgiving glare onto the hospital floor, creating a stark contrast to the swirling emotions inside me. My breath came in shallow gasps, a constriction tightening around my chest as I took in the scene in front of me. The sight of my brother, disheveled and frantic, made time stall, the shared history of our childhood echoing through the very air between us. For years, we had been each other's anchors, but for now, he felt so distant, estranged under the weight of our family's crisis. "Anna, you need to listen," he urged, his voice wavering but insistent as he grasped my elbow. "Something's gone terribly wrong," and he hesitated, glancing towards our father, worry etched painfully across his face. "I don't want to cause you more stress," but those words hung thick in the air, heavy with foreboding. "But what?" I prompted, the tension tightening my throat again. "What happened, Mom?" "She's gone," he finally blurted out, the desperate urgency in his tone ripping through me like a jagged shard of glass. "She didn't make it home from the grocery store. There was an accident." The world around me dissolved for a moment, the noise of the bustling hospital fading away as shock gripped me. I felt as though the ground had opened up beneath my feet, swallowing whole all sense of reality. "No, that can't be true," I breathed out, disbelief fighting against the suffocating grief bubbling up from within. "She was just at the store." "You're lying, you must be." "Nah, I wish I was," he interrupted, anguish lining his features, his voice low and trembling. "I don't know all the details yet. There's been an accident. She didn't come back, and they called me over there. I thought I should come find you." Before I could absorb his words, the room spun, its corners darkening as panic surged like a tide. My hands clenched around my father's limp fingers, snapping me from the whirlwind of anguish. "What are we going to do?" I gasped, tears spilling over as the magnitude of everything collided me. Father's critical state, the weight of loss crashing into me without warning. The notion of juggling additionally shattered hopes while standing on the brink of despair felt insurmountable. My brother's eyes softened at the sight of my turmoil, that brief glimmer of connection returning. "We'll figure it out, Anna. Together, we always do. But right now, we need to be here for Dad. He needs to know we're okay." The fragile thought of facing our father with this heartbreaking news tangled in my mind, threatening to smother the last remaining sparks of resilience I had clung to. "I don't know, do I even tell him?" I whispered, anguish flooding my voice as I felt the walls closing in, the looming specter of grief unfurling itself in front of me, drenched in despair. In that moment, it struck me how much my father had been our unyielding foundation through every storm, now a shadow of his former self, yet so close to memories. He had protected us with love all our lives. Would we be able to provide him even a fraction of that same strength now when the day turns so bleak? "Maybe we don't have to say it just yet," my brother suggested softly, tentatively taking a seat beside my father, mirroring my grip on his hand. "Just being here, being a presence, it might be enough for now. We have always been a family, and we can get through this." His voice carried a certain weight, but still I felt torn between the pressing urgency of his words and the knowledge of the hurt that loomed so desperately in the air. I nodded absent-mindedly, forcing my breath into a rhythm that barely masked the ferocity of my grief. Just then, movement stirred in the corner of my vision. A nurse entered quietly, breaking the heavy silence, her demeanor a careful blend of professionalism and compassion. "How is everyone doing in here?" she asked gently, her eyes sweeping over the two of us, assessing our white-knuckled grips on our father's hand. Where I started, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. She acknowledged the heaviness etched upon our faces and walked closer, her presence somehow soothing. "I'm sorry for what you're dealing with. It must be so hard right now. Is there anything I can get you?" "A snack, some water." I appreciated her empathy, the small gesture a salve for my raw emotions, but it felt meaningless amidst the upheaval we faced now. My brother shifted nervously, glancing at me as if he couldn't find the right words. "Actually," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "could you tell us if there's any way to contact my mother's family? We might need some." "Oh." The nurse interjected, her expression changing as she understood the depth of his inquiry, her eyes widening slightly with concern. "I can help you with that. Let me find the right resource for you. You need a support network around you." Her offer of help clung to that moment, a thread of light illuminating the darkness. As she bustled away, my brother and I shared a fleeting look, the interconnectedness of our pain facing the terrifying unknown becoming palpable. Yet, just as quickly as that glimmer of hope emerged, my phone buzzed again, pulling me back into reality. I glanced down and saw that Rachel had texted searching for updates, delivering kindness even in the face of chaos. "I'll keep you updated," I whispered to my brother, who clenched his jaw, determination setting into his features, but deep inside me, uncertainty gnawed relentlessly. Just as I texted Rachel back, shifting my attention to the flickering screen, I felt apprehensive about what the coming hours would bring. And as my brother and father sat motionless beside one another, I knew that the swirling tide of our fate was far from decided. Then my heart sank as another familiar figure approached, this one shrouded in the dark cloak of dread. Someone I hadn't expected, someone who had left part of me shattered long before this day. My mother's estranged sister, her eyes clouded with grief and daunting questions. "Anna, we need to talk." Her words hung heavy, unbearable in the air. I wanted to scream, to deny what was unfolding. None of us were prepared for the revelations cascading down upon us like a storm. And suddenly, nothing felt certain, our journey thickening with the complexities of unresolved family fractures, overwhelming grief, and the blurring line between hope and despair. The tension in the room thickened with every heartbeat, vibrating in the air like a poorly tuned string. Time whooshed by, seconds felt like hours as I watched my mother's sister approach us, bearing an expression of grief tangled with something sharper, something resembling guilt. The years of silence between us tinged the atmosphere with a bitter depth. "Anna," she repeated, urgency threading through her voice as she stepped closer, the faint smell of jasmine perfume mingling uncomfortably with the sterile scent of the hospital room. "Why are you here?" I cut her off, the bitterness rising inside me toward her arrival like a toxic wave. "You haven't been part of our lives for years. What do you want now?" Before she could respond, my brother squeezed my hand. "Let her speak, Anna," he urged softly, his voice a steady anchor in my chaos. So I turned my gaze on her again, seeing the edges of her vulnerability through the emotional haze. "That I heard about your mother," she said, the words tumbling out in fragmented breaths. "I came as soon as I could. Too didn't know what happened until I felt the tremors radiating through the family. I wanted to be here for all of you. Why now?" My voice was cold, harsh, so unlike the fearful yet hopeful little girl who once yearned for the approval of her mother's sister. "After all these years, I regret that it took something so tragic to snap me out of my stubbornness." The sharpness of her honesty drew out a strangled sound from deep within me, partly sorrow, partly disbelief. "The truth is, I was wrong to turn my back. Your mother deserved better from me, and to want to make it right." Somewhere behind her words, traces of sincerity flickered. I struggled to decipher the emotion battling within. Against the swelling noise of grief, it seemed absurd that this could somehow lead us toward reconciliation, particularly now when everything felt so broken. "That I am sorry," my brother interjected, his voice quiet but insistent. "Right now, we don't know what we need. We're dealing with the loss of our mother and our father's illness. Well-intentioned as this might be, it might not help." His attempt at guarded honesty was commendable, yet it did little to chase away the tension hanging in the air like a thick, gloomy fog. My mother's sister lowered her gaze, nodding almost imperceptibly, which sent a tiny wave of empathy rolling through me, reminding me of the shared blood binding us together, wounds inherited across generations. "Even so, I have family in town," she said, her voice lifting slightly. "I can help you reach them. They may have more to offer than just me, connections that could give you some support." My heart clutched at the suggestion, a knot twisting painfully in my stomach. Did I really want to let this piece of my family back into our lives at such a fragile moment? And did it even matter? Who had time for old resentments when loss surrounded us like a flood tide? A thick silence enveloped us until the nurse returned, her presence bolstering the emotional wall I had built around myself. "I managed to connect with your relatives. They should be here." Before she could finish, I sat up a little straighter, hope flickering like a candle against the storm. "Thank you," I blurted, finding space to breathe as a sense of relief washed over me at the thought of familiar faces wading through the waters of our grief. It felt foolish to count on them, to let down my guard so easily, but I did crave connection. The nurse nodded knowingly, her eyes warm as though she understood the tempest within us. It's the least I could do. Just know, you're not alone in this. This is a safe place. Her kindness was a balm over my jagged soul, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Perhaps in the midst of all this pain, flickers of compassion could stitch the frayed edges of our lives back together. Just then, I received another text. Rachel had sent another message, this time offering her own support, a reminder that love still threaded through the schisms created by tragedy. "I'm here for you, no matter what," she wrote. The sincerity behind the gesture shimmered through, a rising tide against the encroaching dark, but as I began to respond, something shifted. The door swung back open, revealing not just any face, but the one I feared the most, one that sent tremors down my spine. Andrew, my mother's estranged brother, stood there, pale and burdened, the years etching somber lines on his face. The chaos of everything came crashing down in that moment, suddenly overwhelming. He had avoided family gatherings, sheltered in a cocoon of his own grief after whatever rift had blown our family to pieces all those years ago. "Anna," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper above the commotion, "I didn't know, please can we talk?" My heart raced, caught between shock and a sense of impending doom. The world around us blurred and dimmed, and I wondered how far the ripples from our mother's tragic accident would spread. Would they resonate into an unexpected unity, or would they shatter into even smaller fragments? Just as I thought the cascade of grief could not deepen, it reared up like a cruel serpent, ready to consume us whole. The air grew static with the weight of Andrew's presence, an uninvited wind billowing through walls meant to keep our grief contained. My instinct was to slam down the shutters, to push him back out into the world that had cast him aside for so many years. But there was no denying the threadbare connection we shared, woven with strands of a family legacy tarnished by silence and loss. "Anna, please," he pleaded again, his eyes once familiar and comforting now tracing the lines of uncertainty marking my brow. "I need to explain that." As visceral emotion crashed through me like waves against jagged rocks, I clutched my brother's hand tighter, searching for his strength. Although he felt similarly ripped at the seams, his ability to act as a calming shore steadied me, assuaging the hurricane of memories threatening to drown my reason. "Explaining what?" I finally managed, my voice edged with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You left your mother without even looking back. What could you possibly say after all this time?" "I left to protect myself," he murmured, his gaze flickering towards the floor. "I thought that distancing myself would spare us all more pain. I thought I would save you from my own brokenness." My breath staggered, disoriented by the emotional honesty draped across his words. It gnawed at the anger I had harbored for too long. His admission didn't absolve him of the years lost, the years when we could have leaned on each other, but it unfurled the tangled knot within me just enough to feel the hint of forgiveness seep through. Just then, the nurse's phone chimed unexpectedly, snapping me from my spiraling thoughts. "Excuse me, I need to take this." "I'll be right back," she said, darting out of the room, but not without casting a lingering glance toward Andrew, her eyes laced with a complex mix of concern and compassion. In her absence, Andrew took a tentative step forward, his presence now taut with desperation. "Anna, I can imagine how hard it feels to face this weight. Losing your mother, it's unbearable. I just found out about the accident, and I had to come. I didn't want to keep running." "Then why do you?" I pressed, throat tight. The atmosphere pulsated with the tumult of unspoken words penetrating the tension, amplifying the inexplicable field of grief we were stone-cold grounded in. "Because deep down, I still care," he said, voice breaking. "Despite everything. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to help. I want to be here." Time seemed to pause in that moment, a brief window of vulnerability spilling over the dark chasms of anger and sorrow as I watched the struggle for connection in his eyes. It made me recall the summer afternoons spent laughing with my cousins in the backyard, tainted now by the realization that those innocent moments before the fracture were lost to the archives of time. Tragedy had taken its toll, turning the past into a sepulchre of nostalgia. Just as I was grappling with the burden of acceptance, an unexpected rush of footsteps sounded from the corridor. A group entered the room, a collective of faces drawn together under the shadow of shared grief. My heart leaped into my throat as I recognized the me mother's family I hadn't seen since the rift. They emerged as if conjured by the force of our mother's love, presenting themselves like the handling of a family legacy I had long since denied. The murmur of greetings mingled beautifully with the heavy atmosphere, but within that, my chest constricted at the sight of their faces marred by worry, all cast in hues of compassion, confusion, and tenderness. They fell upon the walls like a gentle dawn breaking after a long, dark night. Anna. "We came as soon as we heard," said one of my aunts, stepping forward, her arms outstretched, trembling with the weight of everything unspoken. I stumbled back, a whirlwind of emotions stirring my heart like a tempest. It wasn't just the sight of her warmth or the comfort of familial affection, it was the dawning realization that our familial fissures could be healed, perhaps not entirely, but enough to weave a consort of understanding among us. "Can we just breathe for a moment together?" Andrew ventured, as though sensing the impending chaos weaving its way in. "We're family. We may be imperfect, but we have each other at this moment. Let's not let our past keep us hostage now." His words echoed, resonating deep in my soul, a lifeline thrown into the raging sea of despair. There was a fire igniting in the pit of my stomach. I reluctantly allowed it. Would this collective of loss and love create a bridge where once had been a chasm? Could we somehow rediscover that unity amidst the rubble? As I prepared to reply, the memories of laughter and warmth flooded over me, drawing me closer toward the unfolding moment, when hope began to stitch together the scars. But then, just as I thought we could perhaps, just perhaps, allow the boundaries between us to fade, the nurse returned, her expression grave, shattering the tenuous thread of hope that had just begun to weave itself back into our lives. "I'm sorry there's been a complication with your mother's condition." Once again, the air shifted, a miasma of dread filling the room. With each word she spoke, the ground beneath us crumbled, leaving us suspended in an abyss of unknown fate, grasping for something that could slip through our fingers just as easily as it had returned. What happened next unfolded with a crushing inevitability, like a scene in a play where the actors, too late, realize the script dictates tragedy. The nurse's voice, once offering warmth and calm, now felt cold and distant, transforming the fragile thread of hope in the air into razor wire, slicing through what little assurance we had clung to. "Your mother, she needs immediate surgery. The injuries sustained from the accident are critical," the nurse explained, her eyes flickering between my brother and me, seeking a reaction, a semblance of strength in our pale faces. My heart stumbled over itself, thrumming with panic as the words echoed a dire reality I couldn't bear to accept. There was a suffocating silence, a void bursting with agonizing questions, each one a blade embedding itself in my chest. All those years of longing, believing that the systems of hurt from our family's past could be healed by time and kindness, it felt foolish now amid the mortal stakes unfurling around us. "Can't you do something? Call a doctor. Get her ready for surgery," I heard my brother demand, his voice desperate, laced with raw fear. She can't be taken from us again." The pleading eyes of our family members reflected the storm brewing inside that I swallowed hard, feeling my throat constrict with panic. The thought of yet another loss shook me to my core. I couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not when I had just begun to embrace the flickers of familial connection, not when I was staring the specter of grief in the face once more. Did I stepped closer to the nurse, my heart thundering. "What can we do? How can we help?" I asked, my voice firm despite the unsteady tremor beneath. "We need to fight for her. Please, we need to." My insistence echoed in the room, sending ripples of disbelief cascading through us. The nurse nodded slowly, her compassion shining through the anxiety. "You can be with her when she comes out of surgery. You can hold her hand. Share your love. That matters more than you think. Families give strength, Anna. They buoy each other in the tide." And as her words settled over me, a question sparked in the depths of my heart: could love be the tether to pull us all through this darkness? Before I could respond, I saw Andrew standing rooted at the door, his expression a mask of uncertainty. I hesitated, emotions swirling through me. Could he, having been so distant, step back into the fold? Could it be that our shared blood could interlace again under this immense storm? Before I could decipher my tangled thoughts, he caught my gaze, vulnerability etched across his features. "Anna, he began, but again, the nurse cut in, urgency in her demeanor. "We need to prepare for the surgery right now. The staff will need absolutely all available support. I promise to update you along the way, but no one can be with her until after we stabilize her." Her words echoed daggers, yet within my heart, a flicker endured. I would be there. We would all be there for her. As scattered as we remained, our long-buried love could still shine through the cracks. In the silence that followed, I found myself stepping away from the bed, retreating to the edge of the room and instinctively weaving my fingers through Rachel's text once more. "Just breathe, Anna," I had told her in a moment of anguish. "You can do this." It was time we recited that truth back to one another as family. I looked to my brother, and then to our relatives, feeling the inevitable tie binding us together in this moment of crisis. "Whatever happens next, we choose to do it together, all right, together," he repeated, his voice richer now, echoing the strength I needed to forge forward. I felt Andrew move closer, bridging the awkward gap that had previously distanced us. "I may have been absent, but now I want to be here for you both, if you'll let me." I pondered for a heartbeat. There had always been the potential for connection in pain, and perhaps within this familial storm, we could find a way to weather it together, melting the years of anger and distaste into something real and powerful. "Yes," I said softly. "We will do it together." Even as the medical team pried the door open, a sense of resolve began to bloom within me. I felt the collective grief edging toward our stances, believing that love would lead us through the turbulent waves ahead. As the team swept into the room, moving like a well-oiled machine, we shared one last, sustaining look, each charged with unspoken fears, hopes, and the remnants of our old selves. Then, in the tumult of sterile chaos, my father's face remained untouched in my mind, all the memories swirled like stars collapsing into nothingness. As the beeping machinery surrounded us, waiting for the impending choices that would shape our fates, I knew the weight of those choices would not solely rest on my shoulders, they belonged to all of us. Together we would share the burden and share the light. Together, we would find a path leading out of darkness, and as the door swung closed behind me, locking away the turbulent storm momentarily, the last words from my heart formed silent prayers, somehow believing that kindness and love could still find their way amid the shadows. Then, as my heart steadied, amidst whispers of uncertainty, a singular thought emerged: while we may strive endlessly for fulfillment in a world fraught with pain, we must always choose connection, for it is ultimately love that binds us, nurtures us, and holds us together, even in the most fragile moments of our existence. And in the fierce grip of love, where grief and hope entwined, I felt for the first time that we were not alone in this struggle. "Together, we can hold on to hope," I whispered, against the silencia promise. My final prayer, a flickering candle casting light even into the deepest shadows.